We received a message late on the night of September 14th, 2011, when the air in Santa Fe had already turned sharp with the coming autumn, and the mountains beyond seemed to breathe with their own ancient rhythm. The email came from an old anthropology professor of mine, Dr. Leonard Hayes, a man known for chasing half-forgotten stories through archives and tribal accounts, and the subject line alone froze me in my chair. The echo of the Sangre de Cristo. Inside, the message was brief, almost cryptic. He wrote that there had been another incident near Wheeler Peak, New Mexico's highest summit, and that the locals were saying the mountain had spoken again. I had heard fragments of that phrase before, whispered over campfires or scribbled into the margins of dusty books in the University of New Mexico library, but I never knew its full meaning. Dr. Hayes invited me and my friend David to join him on a short expedition into the range, insisting that if we wanted to see for ourselves what generations of herders, miners, and hikers had only hinted at, now was the time. The Sangre de Cristo Mountains had always carried an aura heavier than simple geology. Rising like crimson guardians from the high desert, they had been the stage for centuries of human reverence and fear. The name itself, Blood of Christ, was a Spanish inheritance tied to the reddish glow that bled across the slopes during sunset. Though Pueblo elders had older, quieter names for the range, names that translated roughly to the Silent Watchers or the Thirsting Stone. Legends claimed that people who ventured too high alone often returned with wild tales of voices carried on the wind, or strange harmonics echoing through the granite, as if the mountain itself was breathing words. In 1883, a prospector named Elias Grant reportedly vanished in those same peaks after writing in his journal about a song in the stone that followed me at night. His pack mule returned alone, and locals found his abandoned camp by a creek, but no trace of him ever surfaced. Similar vanishings dotted the record through the decades, each wrapped in more mystery than explanation, each feeding the legend of the mountain's echo. I remember the drive north on September 16th, the way the road narrowed and coiled upward, each bend pulling us deeper into that ancient spine of rock and pine. David kept the windows cracked, despite the chill, as if letting the mountain air inside was some kind of initiation. He confessed that he had grown up hearing warnings from his grandmother, who lived near Taos, that the mountain keeps what it wants. I tried to laugh it off, but there was something about the phrasing that gnawed at me. Dr. Hayes was waiting for us at a ranger station in Red River, his beard longer and whiter than I remembered, his eyes restless. He spread an old survey map across the hood of his car, circling an area not far from Lost Lake, where a shepherd had recently reported an unnerving sound that shook the ground beneath his cabin. He swears it wasn't wind, wasn't thunder, Hayes said, tapping the paper with a nicotine-stained finger. He said it was like the stone itself wanted to be heard. That night, before we began the trek, Hayes told us the story of the so-called Echo Trail, a barely visible path said to lead to a natural amphitheater carved into the mountainside, a place where voices carried in impossible ways. Local Pueblo families, he explained, once performed ceremonies there, but the location was gradually abandoned after several ritual participants never returned. No bodies, no belongings, just absence. The danger, Hayes said in a hushed tone by the campfire, is not that you hear something. It's that you understand it. His words left us uneasy, but curiosity outweighed fear, and by dawn we were following him into the dense pines, our packs heavy, our steps muffled by needles and damp earth. The higher we climbed, the more silence pressed around us. Birds vanished. Even the wind seemed cautious, as if unwilling to disturb whatever slept in those ridges. By late afternoon, clouds pooled above Wheeler Peak, painting the sky in slate gray, and Hayes led us off the main trail toward a narrow pass. The path was faint, nearly erased by time, but it was there, a suggestion of footsteps older than memory. As the sun dropped, the rock faces around us glowed faintly red, and I felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the cold. It was as though the mountain itself had taken notice of us, measuring our presence, deciding whether to let us pass. And though I could not name it then, I would soon learn that every story, Every whispered warning about these mountains had been preparing me for what waited just beyond that silent ridge. We set out at dawn on September 17th, the air thin and brittle, every breath like glass in the lungs as we climbed deeper into the folds of the Sangre de Cristo. The trail haze called the Echo Path was no more than a scar of pressed earth half swallowed by pine roots and scree, a remnant of footsteps that seemed older than any map, older perhaps than memory itself. David moved ahead with a nervous pace, his eyes darting from shadow to shadow as if he expected the trees themselves to move. Hayes kept a steady rhythm behind us, his voice breaking the silence only to point out faint carvings on stones that we never would have noticed without him. Spirals, concentric circles, and lines that reminded me of sound waves etched into granite. Markers, he whispered, but also warnings. The further we went, the quieter the world became, until the normal chatter of a mountain hike, the crunch of boots, the rush of streams, the occasional raven, was swallowed whole by an oppressive hush, as though the mountain was pulling sound into itself. Around midday, we reached a clearing where the trees opened to reveal sheer walls of stone on three sides, a natural amphitheater hidden away from the main trails, its granite face striated with crimson streaks that caught the dim light. Hayes stopped abruptly, his expression caught between awe and dread. "This is it," he said, almost reverently. And then it began. At first I thought I was imagining it, a low vibration rising from the ground, subtle as a heartbeat. But it grew, resonating through the soles of my boots, rattling my chest like a drum. The sound was not a single tone, but many, overlapping in strange harmonics, as if dozens of voices were whispering beneath the rock. David staggered back, clutching at his ears, though the sound was not loud, only unavoidable, like a thought you couldn't push away. Hayes, however, stood rooted to the spot, his hands trembling, his lips moving silently as though repeating words we couldn't hear. "Do you feel it?" he gasped. "It's language, not just sound." The vibration swelled, and suddenly the granite walls around us seemed to shimmer with something more than light, an almost liquid distortion, as if the stone itself were alive and shifting. I swear the red streaks pulsed like veins, glowing faintly in rhythm with the resonance. David cried out that he saw shapes in the stone, faces watching us from just beyond the surface. And though I wanted to dismiss it, my own eyes betrayed me, with flickers of impossible forms shifting in the rock, fleeting as breath, but undeniable. We stumbled toward the center of the clearing, compelled as if by gravity, unable to resist the pull. My heart pounded with a mixture of terror and awe, and I felt the distinct, horrifying clarity that something was attempting to communicate, not with words, but with presence, with raw resonance that bypassed language entirely. Hayes fell to his knees, pressing his palms flat against the stone floor of the amphitheater, his voice breaking as he whispered fragments of Pueblo myths about mountains that consume memory and rivers that drink voices. Then, with a shudder, the sound deepened into something I cannot compare to anything earthly, a vibration that made my vision blur and my thoughts fracture. For one blinding instant, I felt not just the presence of the mountain but its age, a sense of vastness so overwhelming it hollowed me out, leaving me weightless and insignificant. David screamed, an unearthly sound of pure fear, and when I turned he was clawing at his pack, his eyes wild, muttering that we had to leave before it took us. I reached for him, but my limbs felt heavy, as if bound by invisible threads. Hayes, on the other hand, was rapt, almost joyful, whispering, "It's beautiful, it's speaking," his face streaked with tears. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the vibration collapsed into silence. The air snapped back with such force my ears rang, and the amphitheater lay still, its stone as ordinary as any other mountain rock. David bolted for the treeline, stumbling, gasping, desperate to escape. Hayes remained on his knees, trembling, his hands raw from the stone, staring at the walls as if he had glimpsed eternity and couldn't let it go. I stood frozen between them, every instinct screaming to run, yet part of me unable to sever the strange tether that bound me to what had just happened. The silence was worse than the sound, suffocating in its weight, and I knew then that whatever had spoken through the stone was not finished with us. I chased after David at first, crashing through the trees with my pack, dragging me backward and my lungs tearing at the thin air, but I stopped when I realized he was no longer behind me. He had vanished into the forest as if the mountain had swallowed him whole. Hayes called out from the clearing, his voice echoing strangely, not like a man shouting through trees, but like words carried inside my skull. Against every instinct I turned back, finding him still kneeling, his palms bleeding where the rock had scraped him raw, his eyes feverish. "Don't you see?" he whispered when I reached him. "It chose us." I wanted to argue, to pull him to his feet, but then the vibrations began again, softer this time, like a distant hum threading through my bones, a lure disguised as comfort. The crimson streaks in the stone glowed faintly once more, pulsing with that impossible rhythm, and I swear I heard my own name whispered in the resonance, stretched and broken but unmistakable. I staggered back, shaking my head, desperate to keep hold of myself, and through the corner of my eye I saw a movement. A fleeting silhouette of David on the ridge, his form blurred, wavering as though seen through water. I shouted, but he did not turn. He walked deeper into the stone itself, dissolving into its surface like a shadow fading at dusk, until he was gone. Hayes broke down then, sobbing not out of grief, but wonder, repeating over and over that he was taken into the song. My stomach turned, my mind fraying at the edges, and I dragged Hayes away by sheer willpower, ignoring his protests, forcing us both down the pass and into the suffocating silence of the forest. We stumbled until the sun dipped, until the trees blurred into blackness, until exhaustion toppled us beside a cold stream where I finally collapsed, half dreaming, half waking, haunted by the phantom resonance still buzzing in my chest. When I opened my eyes at dawn, Hayes was gone, his bedroll abandoned, his boots left neatly by the fire pit as though he had stepped barefoot into the forest without hesitation. Panic tore through me as I called his name again and again, but the mountains answered only with silence, the kind of silence that feels like listening. I carried my pack down alone, each step heavier, each bend of the trail haunted by the certainty that I was being followed not by footsteps but by attention, as if the mountain itself was marking me. By the time I stumbled back to the ranger station in Red River on September 19th, my face gaunt, my hands trembling, I could barely form words. They searched, of course, local volunteers, Forest Service officials, even helicopters combed the ridges near Wheeler Peak, but they found no trace of David or Hayes. The official reports listed them as missing hikers, another tragic but not uncommon story in the unforgiving terrain of the Sangre de Cristo. But I knew, with a clarity I can't explain, that neither of them had simply vanished. They had been claimed, folded into the resonance that lives beneath the stone, into the legend the locals whisper about but never name aloud. For weeks afterward, I heard it in dreams, a low hum at the edge of sleep that grew louder if I tried to ignore it. And once, while walking through Santa Fe Plaza in the bustle of tourists and music, I felt the ground tremble faintly beneath my feet, the echo chasing me even there. I've never gone back to those mountains, though some nights I wake with the taste of cold granite in my mouth and the sense that if I listened closely enough, if in the years since that September, I have tried countless times to bury the memory, to file it away as exhaustion, altitude sickness, some shared hallucination born of fear and folklore, but every attempt collapses when the silence returns at night, pressing in like the airless stillness of that amphitheater. Friends tell me I look older than my years, that my hair carries more gray than it should, and though I nod and laugh, I know the truth. The mountain marked me. I learned this most clearly on March 3rd, 2014, when I was contacted by the sister of another hiker who disappeared near Lost Lake. She had found my name in an old article where I was quoted as a survivor of an incident in the Sangre de Cristo and begged me to tell her what really happened. Her brother, Alan Rivas, was 27, experienced, familiar with the terrain, yet he vanished without leaving a single track beyond a ridge line. Listening to her describe the last GPS coordinates made my stomach turn cold. It was the same slope where we had first heard the resonance. I told her nothing of the truth, only that accidents happen, that mountains are cruel to the unprepared, but her eyes told me she didn't believe me. And perhaps she was right, because 3 weeks later I dreamed of Alan walking barefoot into the amphitheater, his eyes glassy, his lips moving in rhythm with a sound I could not hear until I woke with blood on my tongue from biting it in sleep. Over time, I pieced together fragments from journals, tribal lore, and lost newspaper clippings, enough to understand that the legend of the mountain's echo is far older than Spanish names or prospectors' diaries. Among Pueblo stories, there are whispers of the hungry stone, a place where the earth remembers voices and swallows them whole, preserving them like insects in amber. In a Taos archive, I once found a single line from an elder recorded in 1937. "The rock sings back the dead." That phrase has haunted me more than any dream. When I returned to Santa Fe in 2017 for a lecture, I stood outside the university library at dusk, listening to the wind scrape against the adobe walls, and for a moment I swore the resonance had followed me, faint but insistent, as though carried in my very bones. I know now that the mountain does not simply keep those it takes. It weaves them into itself, into that endless chorus beneath the granite. David Hayes, Elias Grant in 1883, Alan Rivas in 2014, they are not gone in the way we understand disappearance. They are voices in the stone, strands in the resonance, threads in a song older than language. And each time someone vanishes, the mountain's echo grows richer, layered with another human timbre, another memory dissolved into its vastness. That is why I cannot go back, though part of me aches to, because I know if I stand once more in that amphitheater, the sound will not simply call to me. It will recognize me, claim me, and finish what it began. If there is a lesson in this, it is not about courage or discovery, but about humility. The Sangre de Cristo Mountains are not ours to conquer or even to fully know. They are keepers of something immense and incomprehensible, something that does not care for maps or trails or our fragile need for answers. When locals say the mountain keeps what it wants, they are not speaking in metaphor. They are issuing a warning carved from generations of silence and loss. I carry that warning now, etched into my marrow, and though I live far from those ridges, I feel them in every quiet moment, in every breathless pause when the world holds still. The echo is patient. It waits. And when my time comes, I suspect I will not die as others do, but dissolve into that resonance, my voice joining the endless song of stone, another whisper in the crimson light of the blood of Christ mountains. I let myself follow the sound. I too would dissolve into the red stone. And sometimes, when the sun sets and the peaks glow with that blood-red light, I understand why they are called the Sangre de Cristo, and why the old legends say the mountain does not forget, does not forgive, and never releases what it keeps.